Hi, everyone. Welcome to Maddox AI and Post Sales Summit. You are currently watching Automate CS Coaching. I'm excited to introduce our speaker, and as I introduce him, I'm going to have him answer our icebreaker question. What's one AI use case you wish existed but haven't seen yet? Today's session will be led by Chad Hornfeld, Head of Customer Success at Evoca. Hi, Chad.
Hey Bex, how you doing? Really happy to be here and to chat with everyone and share what I've been working on.
Awesome. What's one AI use case you wish existed but haven't seen yet?
And now I may exist, but I think that there would be something that would combine like just my sleep, exercise, and eating habits and have like one overall combined score, something that would know like, what I'm consuming. But I don't think that we're far away from that. But yeah, that's what I would love.
I love to hear that. I think that's something I could use too. Okay, and with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Chad.
Awesome. Well, again, really happy and excited to chat with everyone today. Um, this is a really interesting topic. It's something that I think if I was, as a CSM starting to have this created for me and just a little bit about me. So I head up our customer success team here at Avoca. Avoca is the AI platform for the trades and just a little bit about me as well. I've been in customer success for a number of years. I've written a book, The Strategic Customer Success Manager, and I'm now growing out our team here and building as we're at Avoca. So as I mentioned, early in my career, we never get enough feedback. We never get enough coaching. One of the things I talk about in the book is that, we're told to be more strategic. We're never really given advice in terms of how to do that. And then whenever we're given feedback, a lot of it is just without context. So we don't really know what we're doing wrong, where we can improve. And usually just kind of get this like, hey, awesome job, or, that was great, without really any context towards that. So I started to think through, it's like, okay, well, what are ways that we can improve on that, and how can we use AI to do that? Um, and so, really, what I came up with is a weekly performance report that is sent to the team. And it's not one of these things. It's like, hey, like you're doing these things wrong, like you need to improve. It's more of like, hey, like here's where you're spending your time. And here's where you can work on and improve on. And then here's some other areas that you've done really well at. And the other thing is that I didn't want to just give, general feedback. It was really rooted in specific things that they're doing. And then the other thing is that I really wanted to make this so that it was just automatic. Like, I just don't have time to do this. It's a fairly large team as we grow out our structure. But I wanted to make sure that it was delivered, it's impactful, people find it helpful, and that it's very seamless. And to do this, I used Claude Code, and I tied it into various different systems that we have. So our CRM and HubSpot, Slack, Attention, which is our call recording tool, Gmail, which is really the G calendar, so it's able to see, where people have meetings with, Asana that we use as well. And then, as I mentioned, wanted to send it automatically, and I'll kind of get in terms of how I did that. And then lastly here, in terms of the writing format, I wanted it to be very positive. I wanted it to be something that it's not necessarily coming from me. It's almost like coming from Claude, like a third party. And then also making sure that there's examples that people can look at. Um, so, in terms of the breakdown and how it looks, it's fairly straightforward. I would go through their Google Calendar, go through their calls. It also looks at HubSpot and Slack, and it would just kind of go through an account by account and give people an indication, like where are you spending your most of your time? And a lot of the times, as CS professionals, we don't necessarily track and realize like, oh my gosh, like we're spending like 3 hours with this one client. And maybe, that in terms of the value of that client, maybe it's a bit lower. So just having a sense of where you're spending your time, I think is really important. And then you can determine, okay, should I tailor that back? Should I be getting help? And then on the flip side, like what are those accounts that I should be spending more time with that I'm not? And this is really helpful for a manager as well to get a snapshot of this. And then I'll show you how I look at this as well. And you can give that coaching to the individuals. But a lot of the times it's just, we go about our day. We don't really pay attention. We just kind of go day to day, and we don't necessarily look holistically in terms of, where we're spending our time. In terms of like what went well, I think what's really important there is, um, too often, again, we're just moving so fast and we're not necessarily looking at those successes and the progress that we've made. Um, and then when it comes to things like performance reviews, it's like such an arduous task. It's just like, oh my gosh, like what did I actually accomplish? And this actually provides a quick summary as to where things went well and how you've done. And I think it's really, really important to track all of that. And then in terms of where to improve, this is always a hard one, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I am.
because
Hey,
you never know in terms of how you've done and where you can get better at. And
yeah.
so I wanted to make sure that I call that out.
I'll take a
Um,
look
and
at
then
it.
priorities for next week. It's always a good way
Well, it
to
makes sense.
indicate like here are the things that you need to focus on. Blockers need escalation, making sure that people realize like, hey, here's some place that I need help. I know as an earlier CSM when I started, it was a little hard for me to ask for help. And so something telling you like, hey, you need to ask for help is like really, really important. And then the last thing I'm going to cover, and this is maybe the most impactful, is what I realized is that, we have certain different plays, we've playbooks, but I wanted to create an overall system so that people understand like when they're on a customer call, there's a certain thing that I'm looking for, a certain special format that I wanted. And I'll kind of go through what that is. And I set up a scorecard in attention to score people. And then I wanted to extract that because it was only kind of based on each call and you have to kind of log into attention. I wanted to extract that and put that in as part of the summary. So really what this covers is like a very comprehensive view in terms of how that person is performing on a week by week basis. And so here's an example in terms of what this looks like. So you can see here, this is just data that's randomized and anonymized, but where you can improve on, there's a specific project that you can that needs to be worked on. Something that you need engineering ownership on as an example. And then here's a particular maybe higher AR account. And maybe the escalation that was done was really not done effective enough and doesn't have enough eyes on it. And so again, like this is almost like you're covering your blind spot and very specific examples. And again, you can see here there's links that go back to the reference where this came from. Um, and you can see that this is actually a page. And so what I realized is that having this sit in Claude or having this sit in an email, I'd say wasn't helpful enough. It wasn't streamlined enough. And in fact, when I first started this, I had these summaries going to email and it would create a draft in my Gmail and it would sort of sit there. And so really what I wanted to do is I wanted to make this easier. And so I asked Claude, like, hey, how can we do this better? And it ended up being the solution was publishing it to a site and creating a GitHub and a repository, which again, that's not necessarily my forte either, but I had Claude sort of walk me through it, and it was fairly simple to do. Cool. So kind of keep going here and sort of showing you a little bit more. One of the things I mentioned is that not only was this telling you where you can do better and kind of where you're spending your time, but I also created a system that I call the Compass Framework. And this is a general approach that I want the entire team to be leveraging when they approach their customer calls. Very, very simple. Some of these things are that we score. Some of these things are sort of outside that we score. So for example, the first part, the C of Compass is making sure that you're coming to the meeting with an objective. What is it that you want to accomplish? The O is outlining the agenda. So when you're in the call, you're outlining an agenda. You're not just jumping in. The M is mapping the value. P is posing key questions. So these are discovery type questions. And then the A is acting on the close, then setting up the next step. And the last one is making sure that you're sending proper follow-up. But really what I wanted to track during the call was, are they outlining an agenda? Are they mapping value? Are they posing key questions? Are they acting on the close and setting the next step? And we're really at the beginning stages of this. The key ones that I wanted to focus on are we actually outlining an agenda and are we actually acting on the close, meaning is it clear what the action items are for each individual? And so again, this is a scorecard that's done in attention, but I was able to extract all of that data and bring it into this particular coaching tool using the MCP that attention has. So in terms of how this looks and in terms of how I delivered it, as I mentioned, the first way I did this is I had this all published to an email. And I found that was just too time intensive. I had to have 20 plus individual emails. And I felt that that just wasn't effective. And so what I ended up doing was publishing it to a site that refreshes on a weekly basis. And there's actually a refresh button that I'll show you. I've added it in very easily. And then what I did was I realized that people weren't just going to go to the site on a weekly basis. So instead of sending an email, I have a DM that comes from me. It sends people a personalized URL. And then what I've done recently is I've added an additional step here where it has three key points that pulls out from that weekly update for them, areas for these people to focus on. And so it's almost like giving you some foreshadowing in terms of, what was, happening last week and things that you should focus on. And, this is actually a real DM that was sent, and the person on my team was very appreciative of it. And in fact, the entire team has been really appreciative of this. They found this to be super, super helpful. And this just runs. I don't have to do anything. And it's super, super impactful. Um, and so what the data revealed when I started to go through this was that we were just wasting time with certain clients. And then the last thing is that there was high value clients that we were ignoring, and it was very evident that there were some clients that needed more attention. And again, it's not that anyone was doing anything wrong. It's just a matter of again, shining a light on those areas that you tend not to shine that light on. And the only way you can sort of see these things is typically a manager kind of going in and inspecting. And here's kind of where AI can do that for you. And so, very, very helpful and easy to do that. Um, so questions here, just as I'll stop for a minute. Are you fact checking the results to make sure the feedback is accurate? Definitely. I take a look at it, and I also indicate in the DM to my team is, hey, like if you see anything off, like let me know. And we found a few accounts that were assigned, and for some reason it was assigned to this individual, and there was something that was off. But every feedback I've received so far is that the feedback has been spot on. But there's always a little tweaking that we make. I unfortunately I spelled one person's name wrong, so I had to go in and make an adjustment there. So people are watching and they're making sure. And it looks like someone mentioned using Gong for this, using Gong coaching versus Claude coaching. So this is really interesting. Um, I haven't used Gong in a little while, and it may be that Gong has better scorecards. But what I found is that Attention has very good scorecards, but I've also found that there's some parts of how Attention maybe indicates as there's a churn risk or something like that. I didn't find it as effective as using Claude and then pulling in other additional data sources. So it could be sentiment from emails, it could be sentiment from even like tickets. And even Slack. And I wanted to kind of round that out and not just leverage the attention call, because sometimes in attention calls, it seems like everything's doom and gloom from that particular call, but that may not necessarily be the case. And then, yeah, the question here, how has it been received from the team? I indicated, I showed you one example, but the team really likes it. They feel that it's actionable, it's helpful, and it just gives that guidance that's needed. And sometimes it's a reminder. I think the other thing that's helpful is that instead of having like a lot of formal one-on-ones, which I would like to do as we're still building on our structure, the other thing that I'm doing is having little spot checks with people and focusing on key areas that things are brought up. I may pull out an item and say, hey, like this seems really interesting. Can we talk about this for like 5 minutes? So it's kind of these like micro feedback sessions to dive in, or I may suggest that this person speaks to a team lead and covers that. So, it changes the dynamic in terms of feedback. And I feel it leads to more actionable results because a lot of the times that you're one-on-ones, you're trying to like fish for these items. There's no more fishing. It's there. And so now you can just really act on it much more quickly. Um, and in terms of pulling this is pulling is using Claude is using attention, but it's also is using other data sources as well. How many iteration versions? It's gone through a few, but I would say not too many. I was able to get it one shot at fairly quickly, starting in Claude using some really good prompts there. And then no, there hasn't been any drama in terms of the feedback. It's been received very positively so far, as I mentioned. So let me get in and sort of showing an example of this. Um, and I was giving you a little bit of a highlight in terms of where it's going. But so this is an example, and we can see this is so my view, I can actually see the entire team, and I can kind of click into each of them. But the actual URL the team gets is their own individual URL. So they obviously don't necessarily see that they're colleagues, but we can see the particular clients, how many calls they had, how many meetings they had, if there's any Slack communications with those particular customers as well. Um, as you can see here, what went well. This particular person pushed a customer live. It goes into the details of that. We can then go in and see the source of that, so we can verify, what the challenges were. Um, in terms of, this mentions the Compass framework. And in terms of this particular individual, they did very well in terms of setting the next step for their calls, which is exactly what we're looking for. And this person acted very well at the end of the calls as well to make sure that it was very clear what the next steps are. And again, like we know that if we do this right, we're not just talking on the call to uncover issues, but we're not just devising solutions, but we're ensuring that the next steps will take place. And so then we'll start to achieve the value that we want for our particular clients. And this one here, this is a great example. This person uncovered a fairly complex client staffing issue, which is really great. And then, in the areas to improve, there's always areas to improve where, and again, this is an area that we're going to focus on more with our team, but how can we actually demonstrate value more during our calls so that we can use each call, each opportunity that we meet with our clients to make sure that they understand the value that they're getting. Um, and so again, like we know we can do a better job. There was one particular example where the, agenda wasn't as structured as we'd want it. And then here are some specific things that this person will work on for this particular week. And then there's an escalation here that falls out to make sure that this person is doing that escalation. And then here is bringing the coaching in from attention, and we can see how they performed. And then it will provide the data sources down here so that you can kind of verify how that person has performed. And so that's really it. There's a refresh button if the person wanted to refresh it, but it does that automatically. So again, very straightforward. Wanted to see if there was one more thing. One of the things I can show you, let me just see if I can bring this up. In a second, I'll just share my broader screen here. Um, let's see here. Where is... Hold on, I'm just going to reshare here. Give me a second. Okay, so I'm taking a risk here, showing my broader screen. So, okay, so this is the routine that's set up in Claude Code. And you see here, you're running this weekly CS performance report. At the end of this presentation, I actually give you a QR code, and you can get a very similar prompt. This is a bit of an updated prompt. But what it does is it goes through attention, looks through my Compass criteria. It provides the rules there, which accounts to include, which accounts not to include. It includes the team members on my team. It tells you where to go through, which sources to go through. Those are all the different team members. It writes this JSON file to my GitHub, and then that GitHub actually publishes to that page that I was showing you. And then this here sends the Slack notification. Here's the actual Slack notification. And you might be saying like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, Chad. Like, this is insane. I could never do this. And honestly, like this was not very hard at all. It was a bit of an iteration on the coaching aspect of it. But it's just about being experimental and trying. I had no idea that I could publish to a web page from Claude Code. but I used Lovable as an example, and I'm able to publish things into Lovable and use that. So I was like, hey, why don't I try this and see what happens? And it said, like, you just need to publish it to GitHub, set up a GitHub account. And then it's like, hey, you need to create a repository and you need to publish the repository. I was like, I have no idea how to do that. I need your help. How do I move this to GitHub? And it did it. And then it's like, okay, now it's in GitHub. How do I get it from GitHub to this particular webpage? And it said, well, here are some hosting solutions that we can suggest. Use this, set it up. Here's how to set it up. I was like, okay. So I just went and set it up. And so, again, all this really requires is a little bit of experimentation, a little bit of patience, and obviously focus. You can't do everything. You need to determine like where you're going to spend your time. So let me go back to the presentation just as a wrap up, and I can look to take questions. One more thing, like this is anonymized as well, but I've created a command center in Lovable. That's like another webinar probably to talk about, but I've just found that using standard HubSpot dashboards are horrible. And I would like to create something that I want to provide to other people in the company with exactly the data that I want. And I started using things like Lovable. You can use Vercel. There's others as well. But you can really get creative and create a much better approach. This is just, again, anonymized data. These are clients that are recently at risk, clients that we got off at risk. Again, this is all part of that command center and just gives visibility to people that they may not have ever had the opportunity to see. And just some advice here. You don't have to wait for your manager. I mean, hopefully, it's certain companies, I understand they lock down these tools. They don't let you do this. But I think this will all change. I can't see it not changing because, there's just so much potential. And there's so many things that you can do. And you don't necessarily have to go and buy certain tools. You don't have to wait for your manager. You can be doing these things yourself. And I would encourage people, if you have access to these tools, start to connect them together using the MCP connectors. If there isn't an MCP connector, ask why there isn't an MCP connector. We did this with attention. That's like, oh, they're beta testing one. I'm like, okay, great. Like, how do I get access to that? And I found out that my VP of sales had access to it. And so I said, I want access to it as well. I don't want to go in and start downloading transcripts of calls and pasting those in. I want to just be able to pull it. Everything is changing every day. And so it's just a matter of being curious and asking. And yeah, start with a question. Where's the time in my team going? How can I help them? What coaching can I give them? They might give you feedback in terms of what they need. And that's kind of where you can start. And I've found that like I was almost getting a bit I had some anxiety. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to do this training. I have to try this. And then I kind of flipped it. I just said, screw it. I'm just going to start to build. And if I get stuck, then I'll just keep building. And that's what I would recommend. And as I mentioned here, the traps that not just CS leaders, anyone gets stuck. Perfection. They want this to be perfection and they get paralysis. Oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. And honestly, you can just start to work through it. And you need to overcome that. Also, sometimes people treat AI as a summarizer. They use it to create emails or summarize certain things. Like it's more than that. You can do analysis. So think about how you can link different data together, abstract data that you never thought you could pull together. Use that and then learn from those insights and then keep, moving and evolving. And then how can you act on that particular data? And so that's, again, like where you need to keep moving towards. So if you want us to start really small, just pick one data source, one MCP, think through one specific question. For example, if you want to understand why certain clients are going live faster than others, take a particular client set, maybe a particular area, dive further in, pull the calls from those clients, look at the emails, look at what other data sources you can get. Obviously, you can talk to individuals as well, but hopefully you can start to pull some of that data together and then start to work through a particular hypothesis and just build this really simple solution. Stand it up, see what it does, share it with others, get feedback. And that's really it. In my presentation here, let me just move this here. There is a QR code. You can access the prompt It's on this particular strategic customer success slash writing. You can access the prompt. Obviously, I mentioned at the beginning, I've written a book about customer success, and what's interesting, the book is not necessarily about AI, but it does reference AI. But I didn't write specifically about AI because AI is evolving so quickly. But the concepts that I talk about here about coaching and being more strategic, AI is just a facilitator to enhance this, to speed it up, to make people more effective. But those core fundamentals, they don't change. How you treat your customers, how you do discovery with your customers, how you follow up, how you show up, all those are the same, both with your customers and within your organization. And then hopefully, you've come away from this particular talk with some ideas and things that you can try. Um, Let me look to see if there's any additional questions.
Yeah, Chad,
Um,
we actually do have a number of questions. First one
cool.
is, how are you fact checking the results to make sure the feedback is accurate?
Yeah, so I answered that one, and it's why I actually include the links to the sources in there, so people can fact check it themselves. But I also ask people, it's like, hey, does anything look off here? And if it does, they just let me know, and then I make maybe slight course corrections. So it's very easy to do that.
How has this been received from the CSMs on the team? Do they feel they're getting actionable feedback from this coaching?
Yes. So everyone that has gotten this has given me extremely high praise on it. They've never had anything like this ever, and they found it to be extremely helpful.
How do you track coaching improvement week over week on each specific area to improve?
I would say I'm not doing that great, but what I do is I make a note of where the areas that people need to improve on. And I think one of the things that I need to do is, now that I've been collecting this data, actually do something like that where I can look at it over time and see how people have improved based on previous week's feedback. But I think the starting point was just to start to collect that feedback.
My company is having a lot of conversations around Gong versus Claude for coaching scorecards. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this. I haven't used Gong in a little while, but yeah, I think use the scorecards. I mean, as you can see, like I use attention scorecards. I just pull the data into here to make it easier for people to see along with other areas. So it just makes I feel like more impactful.
How many iterations or versions has your tool gone through so far?
Just a few so far. Like honestly, like this has been very easy to stand up.
Got it. And one individual missed the beginning of the presentation. What platform are you pulling this information from? Gong or something similar?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like it's using attention, but it's also using other data sources like Slack, Google Calendar, HubSpot, soon to be some other sources as well. So yeah, from many different sources.
Awesome. And I think we cleared the Q&A very quickly. Thank you so much, Chad, for walking us through this. I think it's really awesome that people can go and try this now right after this session. Also, apologies to the attendees. I know Zoom was kind of malfunctioning this morning. We will be sending a recording. So even if you missed the beginning of Chad's session, you will be able to rewatch it. Or even if you've been here the whole time and want to go step by step, you'll be able to do that as well. Thank you so much, Chad, for leading the session. And thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you. Appreciate it.